Today, being Mashujaa Day, I wanted to share with you about Dedan Kimathi's grave. Dedan Kimathi's grave in Kamiti. We are getting old. I do belong to an age group that is called baby boomers. Baby boomers. But I have a problem with the current young generation. I will talk about it before I tell you about Dedan Kimathi's grave, which everybody has been looking. The government has used a lot of money in looking for Dedan Kimathi's grave in Kamiti. I will talk, but you see, I cannot stop the government wasting money and time looking for a grave whose solution is very easy, and I'll tell you from here. But then, you cannot stop the government from wasting its money if it has decided, and especially if when the government decides to use it as a political tool. Every election time, the government would not mind losing 2 or 3 million chasing wind so as to win election. My generation is called the baby boomers. People who are born between immediately after the Second World War up to the time when Kenya got independence. I think those are the people who are called baby boomers. And we are called baby boomers because immediately after Second World War, a lot of people died. And there was an effort to have more babies because a lot of people had been killed during the Second World War. So that is how we were called baby boomers. And then around 1960, it was discovered that the population was rising so much that around 1960s when they started family planning and people started having small family. But before 1960, there was an intentional move by each and every country worldwide to increase the population of people, and that is why our generation is called baby boomers. Then from 1960, 61 there is when people now started this thing called family planning, because it was felt that the population had risen so fast and so on. But in our generation, we were taught to listen more, to learn more. There is something that I can teach you. If I'm not wrong, apart from these things that are technological, like if you are to ask me to give you the specification of my iPhone or even my iPad, I'll tell you wait until I talk to my son or hand over the problem to my son. There are things we can learn from you, but anything of historical, it is you to learn from us. I say this with a lot of emotions because the first video I recorded today was about my father and Dedan Kimathi. And a young man with a too much no attitude came and made some comments that really got me. And I've been told by Justin Chwea that YouTube has a lot of people of that nature whose only intention is to get into your nerves. I'm a former student of GSU training school, so we live in a regimented life. I grew up in a regimented life where you don't come to me to ask a question with an intention of annoying me, and you expect me to behave like somebody who went through a seminary school. There are those things that were there before I was born, which we were taught, And we crammed it very well because we were in a generation that if you are found with a calculator inside an exam room, you are disqualified. We were in a generation that multiplication we used to cram. I remember we were saying 2 2 is 4, 2 2 2 3 is 6. What you could cram all the things, such that when you went to an exam room and you wanted to know 77 times 66, you just close your eye and say 6 7 is what, and then carry what. That is what we used to do. But those people who are know it all are those people who were allowed to enter into their Form 4 exam room with calculators. So, just like you'll grow gray hair, and kids of that generation would want to know how Kenya was around this time. You'd expect them to listen to you and only ask questions where it is not clear. Before I indulge into what I'm trying to say, is that when you want to learn history very well, place yourself at that time. Forget about reasoning in such a situation. Like today, you can criticize the president in anyhow. Some of the things that I've done to Ruto in this page, if it would have happened during Moi's time, even a fraction of what I've done criticizing Ruto, if I would have done even a 10% of what I've done, if it would have been during Moi's time, that one is enough to take you to your grave. But today, when I criticize Ruto, I would not be shocked if he didn't even read. I mean, there are so many things that are talking about him that he would spend a whole time just going through that. So, in brief, I'm trying to say that when we talk about things that happened during Moi's time, transport yourself, take yourself to that time. The time when we didn't have M-Pesa. The time when we used to give bus drivers an envelope to drop at our trading center and give it to a certain shop. Nowadays, if you want to send money to your parents at home, it is just M-Pesa. So when I talk to you about 80s, please transport yourself to that time. And when I talk about Dedan Kimathi's grave in Kamiti, don't talk of course, like today, we have the quarry issue. We have some people who have never been, who have not been found. But you see, the environment in quarry, what do you call, bodies, and even the abduction, you find that we have people, today we have people with the smartphones. You can remember when Jimmy Wanjigi was being abducted, there is some people who had their phones and recorded that. But I'm talking about issues where we did not have smartphones. That is the 80s. And even that, I'm even talking about, like this, in this video, I'm talking about Dedan Kimathi, a person who died. I'm talking about somebody who died, that is 1955, that is 45 years plus 25, 45 years plus, that is 70 years ago. Now, somebody who died 70 years ago, and you start reasoning with the reasoning of today, reasoning when you have DNA, that is behind, that is not, that is neither here or there. So, if you are incapable, because at your age, you have the physical and mental health that can take you back to, I mean, can listen more than 10 times what I can listen. Instead of you teaching me, it is me who is to teach you what happened in the 80s. And me, when I was your age in the 80s, I listened to those people who were there when Dedan Kimathi was there. That is how we pass information. People want to know Dedan Kimathi's grave. They want to go and exhume his body and give it a hero's funeral, a state funeral at his place. I would say this the following. When Dedan Kimathi was arrested, take yourself to that time. Assume that you are in that time. Don't reason the reasoning of today. Do not reason the reasoning of internet days. Reason the reasons of 1955. According to 1955, when Dedan Kimathi was arrested, he was a terrorist. He was a terrorist. A young man challenged me by trying to say things about Dedan Kimathi. First of all, he had a pseudonym, but you cannot be more correct. When my father, who was in Nyeri during that time, when the family of Dedan Kimathi and what my father told me is agreeable, and then you just come there and say, you see, Dedan Kimathi was a freedom fighter, your father was a colonial police officer. When Dedan Kimathi was arrested, the intelligence had penetrated Mau Mau. They had penetrated Mau Mau and divided the Mau Mau. There was the wing that was following General Madenge, and there was the wing that was following Field Marshal Dedan Kimathi. And Dedan Kimathi reached a place where he decided enough is enough, and he was surrendering. And the colonial people decided to, hata siku hizi, when you are arrested by a police officer, are you not aware that the police can arrest you on the road? But by the time you reach the police station, they have bang on you and something like that. So they added game trophies, leopard skin and other things, and he was charged with that. So he was charged as an armed robber. He was never charged as a freedom fighter. He was charged with as an armed robber, as an armed poacher. That is what he was charged with. And he was sentenced to hanging. Yes, he was hanged. And he was buried in Kamiti. Now, this is what I want to tell you people. That even though he was seen as a terrorist by both people, and I want to reason the reasoning of today, you'll notice that just before around 2010 and 2020, around 2020 and 2021, a lot of people were arrested and charged. And when Ruto and Gachagua took over, suddenly the director of prosecution started withdrawing cases. And when asked, he said these were politically motivated cases. I want to reason with you the reasoning of today, so that, because most of you, especially young men, do not want to transport themselves to the 50s. Now let us transport ourselves to the 2020. A lot of cases were withdrawn when Ruto was sworn in as the president, including some cases which were directly connected to Gachagua, who became the deputy president. Now, supposing Ruto and Gachagua lost the 2022 election, then those people would have been convicted and jailed. Isn't it? Those people would have been convicted and jailed. But because Ruto and Gachagua won the 2022 elections, it was said that those cases were politically motivated cases. I want to also to take you to 1990. 1990, USSR fell. USSR collapsed and fell. Suppose 1990 it was the USA that fell, collapsed, and USSR was still to be there, the history of the world would have changed. So Dedan Kimathi posthumously was declared a hero because the side that he was on won the 1963 whatever. But if the colonialists would have still continued, he would have been placed there in the level of criminals or terrorists. And so when a terrorist of that nature dies, people are very careful. Let me give you an example. Last week, the Israelites discovered, they went and found the body of a leading Hamas. Is it Hamas or Hezbollah person? They went and killed him. And after killing him, they cut off his finger for both DNA and fingerprints to certify that they did not kill the wrong person. And they took off, I think they took off with his body. Now, if they took off with his body, do you want to tell me that the Israelites would show you where the body is? No, they would not show you, because where the body would be made a shrine by Palestinians. The same applies to Dedan Kimathi. When he was buried in Kamiti, you want to tell me that the colonial government treating him as a terrorist, treating him as a terrorist, do you want to tell me that they would preserve his grave the way Jomo Kenyatta's grave has been preserved in the parliament? No. They would not preserve his body. So he was buried like, I cannot even say that he was buried like any other person who has been hanged or whatever. No. His was even more dangerous. And if I can take you to a case that I've already said, the fellow who was killed by DCI, by then it was called CID, in Nakuru. The case where up to today, I think the person was called Mashari or something. This fellow was killed by DCI because he used to organize criminals and whatever. And the people who participated in his burial went and showed the court where the body was, but the body had been interchanged. So anybody who is treated as a pariah by the government, you don't expect the government to segregate him or whatever. Now back again to Dedan Kimathi. In those days, when a prisoner was killed by the state, he used to be buried in Kamiti or whatever prison that he has been hanged. But it changed. It changed. I don't know when it changed, because by the time the 82 attempted coup, Ochuka, when Ochuka was hanged, it reached a stage where people would, when somebody had been hanged, the body would be given to the family. I remember the person who killed Tomboya, Nahashon Jenga. His family was just given clothes and they were told your person has been hanged in Kamiti. Of course, there are rumors that he was in Zambia, other rumors are that he was in Ethiopia, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say is that I do not know when the government changed its policy. The government changed its policy whereby when you are hanged, because the last person to ever be hanged, remember there are two types of deaths in prison. You can be sentenced for whatever, even a week or something. Before you complete your sentence, you die. Your family is called to come and take your body and bury. But a person who had committed or who had been convicted of a capital offense and hanged within the prison, initially they used to be buried within Kamiti. But later on, things changed such that by the time the last person was hanged, Ochuka, the body was found. The body was given to the family, and Ochuka was taken. Ochuka's grave is where he was born. Now you get me. So the time when Dedan Kimathi died, was hanged. You leave alone that was 1955. Even as late as 1970, anybody who has been hanged in Kamiti would be buried within Kamiti. Would be buried within Kamiti. So Dedan Kimathi was buried within Kamiti in an unmarked grave. Now, how many people? We do not know who is the last person to be a capital offender who has been buried in Kamiti, but I think the last known case is that one of Tom Mboya. So we can say that the last person who was buried in Kamiti was buried in 1970. 1955 to 1970, that is how many years? 15 years. Can you tell me how many capital offenders were killed in those 15 years, were hanged? There are many. So getting just one grave is a bit hard. And most of the people, we have heard people sincerely, how can somebody spend 70 years and then come and say, if the government requests me, I can show them where Dedan Kimathi was buried. Please understand that that person wants to be seen aside. And in the Kenyan system, if you are seen aside, you know what that means? Unapewa kitu kidogo. Why keep quiet for all those 70 years? Why? Okay, we understand that the two governments, Jomo Kenyatta's government and Daniel Arap Moi, never wanted to know anything about Mau Mau. It is only Mwai Kibaki who decriminalized Mau Mau movement. Why didn't you tell it in the year 2002? Lastly, but most important, go to anywhere in Kenya, anywhere. Take yourself, stand in a place and look back. This is 2024. Look back 20 years ago, 2004. Take yourself 40 years ago. That is 40 years, that is 1984, if I'm not wrong. Now, stand where you are, just like where I'm standing. You can see behind there, inside the forest, there are some flats. Now, if you are here in the year 2004, those flats would not be there. This would be a forest. Now, take yourself 40 years ago, 1984. How would this place look? Then go back another 20 years, 1964. And another 20 years, 1940. Or they take back 20 years, 1954. This place would look very different. And this is a residential area. It used to be a forest. Now people are staying there, even staying in flats, as you can see. What of Kamiti? Kamiti prison, how has it changed from 1955 or 1954, 70 years ago? It has really changed. Things have changed and whatever. And I can tell you, as I pen off, that systems do not like identifying graves of people who people will turn into shrines. And that is why Osama bin Laden was buried in the sea. He was not to be buried at a place where mujahidins would regularly go there for pilgrimage. So, viewers, The long and short of this story is that let us admit, I was born 1961. That was, is it 6 or 7 years after Dedan Kimathi had been buried. Let us just admit that, and my grandfather, whom I was named after, was buried the same year that Dedan Kimathi. My grandfather died a natural death, but even today, I would have it very rough to trace JI-TENGE's, my namesake's grave. What of Dedan Kimathi, who the government didn't like, whom the government didn't want to be honored in his death? It's really hard. So in brief, we can say that let us accept and move on, and accept that we shall never. I'm avoiding using the word we may never. Someone is saying that we may never discuss. This is a place that has been modified. Kamiti those days, you look at the hospitals and even schools. When I was in school, during Jomo Kenyatta's time, a classroom used to have 25 students. Nowadays, a classroom has a minimum of 150 students, isn't it? We have between 100 and 150. So schools which were small, and even Kamiti, if you go to Kamiti, you'll find that a lot of new buildings, a lot of development have been done and whatever. So even if there is anybody who can remember, because these people are saying that if I'm given a time, I'll go and check. There is a certain tree where we went, let's say 20 steps to the left and 15 steps to the front. Are you sure that tree is still there? Things are so much changed that even where I am standing now, somebody who was there in the time when Dedan Kimathi was hanged, if he were to come here, he would be lost. So kwa hayo machache na mengi, I would say that Kenyans, we should reach somewhere on this Mashujaa Day and agree that Shujaa Dedan Kimathi Washuri was buried in an unmarked grave, and we will never, I'm not trying to say we may, we will never find his grave. Thank you.